all of the potentialities of the world are gathered in the human being. وجد بعد وجود الأشياء التي جمعت فيه, and after وجد بعد وجود الأشياء التي جمعت فيه, and were brought forth all of these things that were gathered in him. وجد بعد وجود الأشياء التي جمعت فيه. So they came after. وعلى هذا نبه الله تعالى الذي أحسن كل شيء خلقه وبدأ خلق الإنسان من طين. So the one who perfected everything that he created, and he began the creation of the human being with mud. وقول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم الذي تقدم ذكره. So the human being was created after all these things, and all of the potentialities, the powers that are in the world were placed in him. And that's what he's saying here, is that he created everything with ihsan, and then he began the human being as he's going to argue that it's an abridgment of the whole world that he created. وقول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم الذي تقدم ذكره. And that was mentioned in the Ka'b al-Ahbar, the saying of Ka'b al-Ahbar about what Allah created during the various days. وقد جمع الله تعالى في الإنسان قوة بسائط العالم ومركباته وروحانياته وجسمانياته ومبدعاته ومكوناته. فالإنسان من حيث إنه بواسطة العالم حصل ومن أركانه وقواه وجد هو العالم. So Allah gathered in the human being basa'it al-alam. So the basa'it here means the elements. You know, you have in medicine, in tibb al-Arabi, in the traditional tibb that Ibn Sina was a master of, you have what are called the basa'it and the murakkabat. So you have simple cures or treatments, and then you have compound. So for instance, like aspirin is one thing, but if you take a medicine that has several different types of medicine in it, or like an antibiotic, it's one thing that's in that thing, like penicillin. So that would be a basit. But it also can mean elements, just generally the word basa'it. It's the foundational things, the simple substances. وروحانيته, the spiritual matters, وجسمانيته, and the material. So he means the spiritual and the material. ومبدعاته, all of his extraordinary creations. ومكوناته, and all of those things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kawana, like brought them into existence and formed them and fashioned them. فالإنسان من حيث إنه بواسطة العالم حصل. So the human being, by means of the world, he came about. ومن أركانه, from the very elements of the world. وقواه أجد. And وهو العالم. So like we're made, we know now that we're made of even the whole universe, what it's made of. We have all of that in us. That's his point, is that we have the stars in us, we have the planets, we have the ether. It's all in us, in the human being. And then he says, ومن حيث إنه صغر شكله وجمع في قواه كالمختصر من العالم. So Allah has really like shrunk or diminutived his form and gathered in it all of the potentialities of the world, everything that's in the world. كالمختصر. It's like an abridgment of the world. So in other words, we are the microcosm. That's what he's saying basically. فإن المختصر من الكتاب. So if you look at the abridgment of a book, هو الذي قلل لفظه. It's the one in which the words are diminished. So it's a paucity of words. واستوفي معناه, and yet the meaning is complete. Because a lot of books, as you know, have things that expound upon, but you can abridge a book to get to the fundamental things and not miss anything from the book. So if you read, for instance, an abridgment of the Muqaddimah of Ibn Khaldun, or Toynbee's abridgment. Some of you read that here, the study of history. He took 9 volumes and reduced it down to 2 volumes. And you will get in that book the basic contents of the 9 volumes. So, ومن حيث إنه جعل من صفوة العالم ولبابه وخلاصته وثمرته فهو كالزبد من المخيط. So he's saying, and from the point of view that he was made from the essence of the worlds, its pith, its innermost core, and the summation of it and its fruit. He is in essence like the cream or the butter that rises from the makhid. Makhid is like sour milk. So the Bedouin, and I mean this is something you'll find in a lot of traditions, but the Bedouins still do this. So you have this thing called a jaffafa, and it's basically a goat skin, and it has, they've stitched it all up. They put the milk in, and then they rock it. And the milk, there's enzymes in there, so over time the milk will get sour, but then the butter rises. So he's saying that that's what, if you look at the creation like that milk, but the essence of the milk is that cream, that's the human being from creation. He's using that as an analogy for that. وَالدُّهْنِ مِنَ السِّمْسِمْ, or like the oil from sesame. فَمَا مِنْ شَيْءٍ إِلَّا وَالْإِنسَانُ يُشْبِهُهُ مِنْ وَجْهٍ. So there's nothing in the world except you'll find some similarity between that thing and between the human being. كالأركان. So if you look at the elements of the world, من حيث ما فيه من الحرارة والبرودة والرطوبة واليبوسة, from the perspective of heat and cold and moisture and dryness. So human beings have all those elements based on that 4 elemental theory. Or كالمعادن من حيث ما هو جسم. Or like the minerals, because the human being has minerals in his body. So he's a material form, like a rock. And the Prophet ﷺ said also spiritually, الناس معادن. People are spiritual minds. So there's gold people, there's silver people, there's copper people, there's lead people, there's radioactive people, toxic people. Like people, there's الناس معادن. And then he says, وَكَالنَّبَاتِ مِنْ حَيْثُ يَتَغَذَّى وَيَتَرَبَّى. And also we're like the vegetable world, because we grow like vegetables. We eat, like you pour water on the plant and it grows. You give it the potassium and the phosphate and it grows, or manure, or whatever you do, the compost. So the same with the human being. We grow like that. وَكَالْبَهِيمَةِ, or like the animal kingdom, so mineral, vegetable, animal, مِنْ حَيْثُ مَا يُحِسُّ, that it's sentient, وَيَتَخَيَّرُ, and then it also has levels of perception, وَيَتَوَهَّمُ, like an animal can actually be frightened and think something's there that's not there. Like an animal can see a rope and think it's a snake, and so it imagined something that wasn't there. So it's saying we share that with the animals. We know that animals also have pleasure and pain. I mean, animals, a cat, if you pet a cat, it starts purring because it enjoys the petting, the touch of it. And then he says, وَكَالسَّبْعِ مِنْ حَيْثُ مَا يَحْرَدُ وَيَحْرَبُ, or يَحْرِدُ وَيَحْرِبُ is حَرِدَ يَحْرَدُ وَحَرِبَ يَحْرَبُ. I think it can go both ways. كَالسَّبْعِ مِنْ حَيْثُ مَا يَحْرَدُ وَيَحْرَبُ. So يَحْرَدُ is like to get angry, حَرِدٌ, somebody who's angry, and يَحْرَبُ, they get belligerent. So he's saying we're like predatory animals that can get belligerent. وَكَالشَّيْطَانِ, or demons, مِنْ حَيْثُ مَا يَمْكُرُ وَيَكِيدُ وَيُغْوِي وَيُضِلُّ, or we become like demons in that we plot and we have these Machiavellian strategies, and that we lead people astray, right? Like shayateen. وَكَالْمَلَكِ, or we can be like the angel. مِنْ حَيْثُ مَا يَعْرُفَ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى وَيَعْبُدُهُ وَيَخَافُهُ. We can be like the angel that knows God and worships God and is in awe of God. وَكَاللَّوْحِ الْمَحْفُوظ, or we could be like the preserved tablet. مِنْ حَيْثُ قَدْ جَعَلَهُ اللَّهُ مَجْمَعَ الْحِكَمِ, that Allah has put all of the wisdom of creation into that tablet. التي كتبها فيه على سبيل الاختصار. So he's like again an abridgment. فقد ذكر بعض الحكماء في بدن الإنسان 4000 حكمة. One of the sages said that in the body of the human being are 4,000 wisdoms. وفي نفسه قريب من ذلك, and in his soul is something similar to that. وكالقلم من حيث ما يثبت بكلامه صور الأشياء في قلوب الناس كما أن القلم يثبت الحكم في اللوح المحفوظ. And also we're like the qalam that Allah created and said اكتب من حيث ما يثبت, because it's the pen preserves the words by صور الأشياء في قلوب. So the human being, when we speak, you can actually create conceptualizations in the people. كما أن القلم يثبت الحكم في اللوح المحفوظ. So when you speak, it's as if your tongue is a pen, because it's having an impression on the one you're speaking to. There's something that's happening. There's a taswir in their hearts that's happening. ولكون الإنسان مكونا من قوى مختلفة قال الله تعالى إنا خلقنا الإنسان من نطفة أمشاج نبتليه. And from the perspective that the human being is created from all of these different powers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we created the human being min nutfa amshaj nabtalihi. So this is a very interesting verse in Surah Al-Insan. It's one of the ishkalat in tafsir, because the nutfa is singular, but the amshaj, which is a sifa here of the nutfa, is plural. So mashij is it's multicolored. It's something that has a cloth that's mashij. It's woven, interwoven. So there's a warp and woof to it. So amshaj is mixed. So it's a nutfa mixed. I really think genuinely that this ayah is one of the great miracles of the Quran, because I think it's clearly indicative of the zygote, which is the mixing of the male and the female genetic material. And it's very interesting that the word, and I don't know why they did this, but the word in modern Arabic for the genetic material is the same word that is used here and I don't know if they did that purposefully, or is that just merely a linguistic coincidence, or if it is, then it's clearly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's like Imam Malik was asked about the porpoise. Porpoise, it's called khanzir al-bahar, which means the pig of the ocean, because porpoise in Greek means ocean pig. And so, because it's got that snout, right, the porpoise. So they asked Malik, what he thought of it. Did he think it was permissible? And he said, Antum sammaytumuhu khanzira. You named it a pig. In other words, just because it has that name, I wouldn't eat it. So names are very interesting in that way. أي مختلطة من قوى أشياء مختلفة. So it's mixed from all these potentialities, from all these different things. ولكون العالم والإنسان متشابهين إذا اعتبرها قيل الإنسان عالم صغير. And from this point of view, that the world and the human being resemble one another, if one considers, if this is considered, then it's said that the human being is the microcosm, and that the universe is the great man, right? ولذلك قال الله تعالى ما خلقكم ولا بعثكم إلا كنفس واحدة. And for that reason Allah said your creation and your resurrection is like one nafs, كنفس واحدة. فأشار بالنفس الواحدة إلى ذات العالم. So he's saying that he's interpreting that to mean that the nafs al-wahida is the essence of the world. This one soul, this one is the essence of the world, because nafs can mean essence. So he's saying it's that العالم. ولما كان كل مركب من أشياء مختلفة يحصل باجتماعهن معنى ليس بموجود فيهن على انفرادهن كالمركبات من الأدوية والأطعمة كذلك في نفس الإنسان حصل معنى ليس في شيء من موجودات العالم وذلك المعنى هو ما يتخصص به من خصائصه التي يتميز بها مثله عن غيره من هيئات له كانتصاب رقامته وعرض الظفر وانفعالات له كضحك والحياة وفعل له كتصور المعقولات وتعلم الصناعات واكتساب الأخلاق والله أعلم. So then he says, when every compounded thing from all these diverse things, when you see that they are all gathered into يحصل باجتماعهن معنى ليس بموجود فيهن. So it's the whole is greater than the parts, the sum of the parts. I mean, that's what he's saying basically, is that when you see that, right, فيهن على انفراد, if you took them as parts, كالمركبات من الأدوية والطعيمة, just like if you take medicine or food that is compounded. وكذلك في نفس الإنسان حصل معنى ليس في شيء من موجودات العالم. So the sum of the parts, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. That's what he's saying. That put together, the human being is much greater than all of the sum of the parts that make up the human being. وذلك المعنى هو ما يتخصص به من خصائصه, and that's the meaning that is specific to him from those particularities that God has given that human being, التي يتميز بها مثله عن غيره, that distinguish him from others. من هيئات له, from all these different aspects to the human being. كانتصاب رقامة, like the fact that he's upright, that he has broad fingernails, and then also the passions that he's susceptible to, like risibility or blushing, modesty, or the actions that he's capable of, like conceptualizing intelligibles. So we actually have things that exist in our minds only, that don't exist in there's extra mental existence, but then there's wujud dhihni. So you have wujud khariji, wujud dhihni. So we can actually conceptualize intelligibles like numbers. So the numbers don't have a wujud khariji, right? Mathematics. There aren't numbers in the world really. They're intelligibles that are conceptualized by our minds. They're abstractions. And also learning all of the crafts and skills that human beings are capable of, and also acquiring good character. So this goes back to Imam Ali radiallahu anhu's famous statement, دواؤك فيك ولا تشعر, وما تبصر. دواؤك فيك وما تبصر. The cure is in you and yet you don't see it. وداؤك منك ولا تشعر. And the disease is from you and you don't feel it. وتحسب أنك جرم صغير وفيك انطوى العالم الأكبر. And you deem yourself an insignificant thing, and yet in you the whole cosmos exists. So this is something that the Muslims understood early on. This is not a Greek philosophy. This is the microcosm and the macrocosm is something that Imam Ali articulated, and it's very clear from his istidlalat. So الإنسان تكون الإنسان شيئا فشيئا حتى يصير إنسانا كاملا. الإنسان يتكون أولا جمادا ميتا كما قال الله تعالى وكنتم أمواتا فأحياكم وذلك حيثما كانت ترابا وطينا وصلصالا ونحوها ثم يصير نباتا ناميا كما قال الله تعالى والله أنبتكم من الأرض نباتا وذلك حيثما كان نطفة وعلقة ومضغة ونحوها ثم يصير حيوانا وذلك حيثما يتبع بطبعه بعض ما ينفعه ويحترز من بعض ما يضره ثم يصير إنسانا فيخصص أو يختص برفعال الإنسانية. So he says the human being begins from an inanimate substance. He begins from an inanimate substance. Allah says, كنتم أمواتا فأحياكم. You were inanimate and we animated you. We brought you to life. So you were inanimate, mayyit, and we brought you to life. وذلك حيث كانت ترابا. And what he means there is that you were dirt, you were mud, you were soil rather. You were mud, and then you were the ceramic preparation. ثم يصير نباتا. And then you became vegetative, that had growth. And that's what Allah means when He says, Allah ambatakum min al-ard. He caused you to grow from the earth. He caused you to grow nabatan. Nabat is vegetable. So we go through these stages. And this is very important because when we get to the end of the book, you're going to see that this is very important, these stages, that he's spending time on this because he comes to a profound conclusion at the end of this, which is really actually, it's so overwhelmingly stunning that it'll just give you a completely different perspective on why God has created us in these phases and stages and what God intends by it. So, and then he says, وَذَلِكَ حَيْثُ مَا كَانَ نُطْفَةً وَعَرَقَةً وَمُضْغَةً وَنَحْوُهَا. So that's the vegetative, that's biological life, and that's why even though the spiritual life has not come into you're in a vegetative life. So we were nabat, right? And then we go to the animal, and then we go to the spiritual, the immaterial, when we get our soul. So those are the phases that we go through. Allah has put us through these phases. So we were dead with just substance that was not biological life. So we were basically mineral, and then we became a vegetable, and then we become animal, and then we become human. So we go through these phases. And he said, ثم يصير حيوان, and then animal. وذلك من حيث يتبعه بطبعه بعض ما ينفعه. In that you follow by your nature things that benefit you. ويحترز من بعد ما يضره. So every animal that's healthy will look to secure its benefit and do what it needs to do to avoid harm. And that's why Allah says that the human is more astray than animals, because they don't look after their benefit. I was with one of my boys once many years ago, and this lady was smoking a cigarette, and my son had never seen smoke before. Like, he hadn't seen anybody smoke. So he was just staring in utter shock at seeing this woman smoke coming out of her mouth. And she looked at me and she said, "Don't you ever do this." Now that is not a good role model, right? Because somebody who's doing something and telling you not to do it, I mean, there's a contradiction there. But that's the human being. They will do things they know are harmful for them, whereas animals won't. So that's what he's saying there. ثم يصير إنسانا فيخصص بالأفعال الإنسانية. And then those things that make us human then become part of our, of our nature. وقد نبه الله تعالى على ذلك من مواضع كثيرة. So Allah has indicated this in many places in the Quran. Like when Allah said, يا أيها الناس إن كنتم في ريب من البعث فإنا خلقناكم من تراب ثم من نطفة ثم من علقة ثم من مضغة مخلقة وغير مخلقة لنبين لكم ونقر في الأرحام ما نشاء إلى أجل مسمى. So, O humanity, if you're in doubt about the resurrection, think about this. We created you from earth, and then from a zygote, and then from a embedded embryo, and then from this developing embryo that is formed and unformed. And then we, in order to clarify to you, and we have instilled in the wombs, made firm in the wombs, whatever we please, to a fixed term. And then Allah said, أَكَفَرْتُ بِالَّذِي خَلَقَكَ مِن تُرَابٍ ثُمَّ مِن نُطْفَةٍ ثُمَّ سَوَّاكَ رَجُلًا. Do you deny, do you negate, do you disbelieve in the one who created you from earth, and then from a zygote, and then made you a human being? فأول ما تظهر فيه قوة النمو الموجودة في النبات. So the first thing that manifests in us is the power of growth, vegetative growth, that you see in vegetables, in the vegetable world. ثم قوة النزاع الموجودة في الحيوانات. And then the next is this قوة of نزاع, right, which is the نزوعا إليه. There's a willfulness there that enters in from the animals. ثم قوة تناول الموافق. And then the power of getting what is pleasing, ودفع المخالف, and avoiding what one doesn't want. ثم الحس, and then sentience. ثم تخيل, imagination. ثم تصور, conceptualization. ثم تفكر, reasoning. ثم العقل, right? So thought, تفكر there would be thought, and then reason. ثم العقل, and then reason. فهو لم يصير إنسانا إلا بالفكر والعقل. So you only achieve your humanity once you get to that ability to think and reason. الذي فيه يميز به من الخير بين الخير والشر. That you can distinguish between good and evil. And this is تحسين قد تقبيح. So you have this khilaf. The Mu'tazilite basically said the aql was able to perceive good and evil. And the other schools, the Maturidiyya and the Ash'ari, they believe that also, but they limit it. So they don't have the absolute position that the Mu'tazilite takes. So they believe that the intellect can perceive what's tahsin and taqbih. Like the intellect is left to understand that knowledge is good and that ignorance is evil. That's the realm. The intellect can do that. It doesn't need revelation to determine that. It can see that theft is bad and that honesty is good, murder is bad, treating other human beings the way you'd like to be treated. Those are things that reason can arrive at. So that's a soft natural law, right? It's a soft natural law. It's not a hard natural law, but it's a soft natural law. But where they differ, and then they also mula'amat al-taba'. They also believe that you like something or dislike something, because a lot of there's a whole theory of ethics called the boohoo theory. The things you don't like are bad, and things that you like are good. So our scholars recognize that that's an aspect of ethics. Like we might find it disgusting to eat snails, so we say, oh, that's bad. But then you travel to France or even Morocco, and they're cooking snails, and the Moroccans say, oh, that's good. So that's just nature, taba'. And Imam Shafi'i puts some emphasis on that in terms of tahsin and taqbih. The third, though, is what relates to iqab and thawab. That in terms of the details of right and wrong, the intellect can't reach that. It can't get to, there are many things that the intellect will not be able to understand. And then also the punishment and the reward that goes with the action. That's the realm of Sharia. It's not the realm of aql. I mean, you can make, there's ta'zir in Sharia, which the aql can do. But in terms of the afterlife, the reward and punishment of the afterlife for actions that are done in this world, only revelation can determine that. The human intellect has no access to that. So he's saying that, that the human being can have this ability to perceive right and wrong, but not in an absolute sense. That's my point. It's limited. And then he says, إلى العقل أشار تعالى وصوركم فأحسن صوركم. He formed you, and what a beautiful form he gave you. Your forms, أحسن. He made them excellent, made them beautiful. فالإنسان بعقله صار معدن العلم. So the human being, through the human intellect, became the source of knowledge. It's the mine of knowledge. This is where you're going to get the knowledge from. ومركز الحكمة. And the center of wisdom. وجود العقل فيه في ابتداء الأمر بقوة كوجود النار في الحجر. So the existence of the intellect in the beginning of the affair is potentiality, is through potentiality. بقوة. Sometimes قوة means power. Sometimes here it means potentiality. كوجود النار في الحجر, like the existence of fire in the flint. والمحتاج في أن يري إلى الاقتداح. So أن يري means like to strike the flint. So if you strike the flint, you'll get the fire. وكوجود النخل في النوى, or like the existence in potentiality. The whole palm tree exists in the palm seed. المحتاج إلى أن يثمر إلى غرس وسقي. So you have to plant it and you have to water it. كوجود الماء تحت الأرض, like the existence of water, table waters that are under the earth. المحتاج إلى الاستسقاء منه إلى حفر. So in order to acquire that water, to draw that water out, you need to drill a well. ونفس الإنسان واقعة بين قوتين. So the human being, the human soul, then exists between these two powers, right? One is the concupiscent, and the other is the rational. I mean, there is a third power, which is the irascible power. So it's قوة الغضبية. So, but here he's basically showing the animality and the angelic nature. So we have these two natures that Allah, and they're in tension. There's a tension between these two, the rational and the appetitive. All right? So the irascible is kind of a moderate, it exists between the two, the thumos, the Greeks called it, right? Which is in that middle phase. فبقوة الشهوة تحرص على تناول اللذات البدنية البهيمية كالغذاء والسفاد وتغالب وسائر اللذات العجلة. And so this appetitive power, it's covetous to, it attempts to obtain pleasures of the body, bodily and animal pleasures, like food and sex, and also to overcome, like to conquer, and وسائر اللذات العاجلة, and all those other more immediate pleasures. وبقوة العقل تحرص على تناول العلوم والآداب, and with the power of the intellect, it covets, it desires, it's really, desires or wants, to achieve knowledges and refinement. There, والآداب means more like refinement. والأفعال الجميلة, and good deeds. والأمور الحميدة, and praiseworthy matters. المحمود العاقبة, that are have praiseworthy consequences. وإلى هاتين القوتين أشار تعالى بقوله إنا هديناه السبيل إما شاكرا وإما كفورا. We've guided you the two paths, either grateful or ungrateful. Kafur here, kafir means ingrate, right? So it also means disbeliever, scoffer. So when he says هديناه النجدين, the najd is a طريق مرتفع, or it's a raised up plain, a road. So we showed him the two clear roads. These are two clear roads that we have shown him. ولما كان من جبلة الإنسان أن يتحرى ما فيه اللذة كانت اللذات على ضربين. So when it was the human nature to seek after pleasure, the pleasures came in two types. أحدهما محسوس كاللذة المذوقات والملموسات والمسموعات والمبصرات والمشمومات وهي من توابع الشهوة الحيوانية. So one of them are the sensual pleasures, like the pleasures of taste, the pleasures of touch, the pleasures of sound, the pleasures of sight, and the pleasures of smell. So the pleasures of the five senses. And these follow the animal appetites. والثاني معقول, and the second type of pleasure are the intellectual pleasures, كاللذة العلم وتعاطي الخير وفعل الجميل. That is the pleasure of knowledge, of doing good, of acting virtuously. واللذات المحسوسة أغلب علينا لكونها أقدم وجودا فينا. It's very interesting. So the sensual pleasures are more dominant in us because they were the first pleasures that we had. Right? So we're more accustomed to them. They're easier, they're quicker. لأنها توجد في الإنسان قبل أن يولد. You experience them in the womb of your mother. غذيتني في الحشا جنينا. You gave me food when I was an embryo in the womb of my mother. وهي ضرورية له في الوقت. And also, قال تعالى كلا بل تحبون العاجلة, because they're immediate. You can get them immediately. Intellectual pleasure takes work, takes effort. Sarah Babakir, she gave a nice, the other day, she was talking about the difficulty that you have in acquiring knowledge, but then when you get it, the pleasure that you get is great. And she likened that to like paradise. That, here it's all struggle, but then in the afterlife, it all becomes meaningful. So intellectual pleasure is difficult. You never see, if you see somebody who's really mastered something, even a great pianist, you don't see all the hours and hours of horrible repetition that they had to do to get to the point where they could play something beautifully. So all intellectuals, mathematics, somebody, you see Yusuf Ismail, it's very easy for him, but you didn't see all the struggle that Dr. Yusuf went through to achieve that level of ability in higher mathematics. It was a great struggle. You don't get there easy. Very few people find those type things easy. There are some people that seem to, but they're very rare, those type people. Most intellectual effort is very rigorous and arduous and takes time. So that's what he's saying, that the sensual pleasures are very quick. You just eat a cake and it tastes great, and then you regret eating it. Right? That's the nature of sensual pleasure. Most of it is actually a little remorseful because it's generally, a lot of it's a waste of time. وَلِذَا يَكْرَهُ أَكْثَرُ النَّاسِ مَا يَأْمُرُ بِهِ الْعَقْلِ. And for this reason, and then Allah says, كَلَّا بَلْ تُحِبُّونَ الْعَجَلَ. You love immediate things and you put off what's coming. So you procrastinate the difficulties. And this is in a book that Erlach and Ornstein wrote called New World, New Mind. One of the things that they say in there is that the human being the brain is designed to react to immediate things, but it actually will put off and delay things that are coming down the road. That's why you have a national debt. Like, $30 trillion, really? Really? How long can you keep doing that? They just keep kicking it down the road. But eventually it's going to collapse the currency. It has to. It's just economics. Adam Smith, last chapter, chapter 5, it's an important chapter in the Wealth of Nations on debts and taxation. And he says, no country has ever survived deficit financing. It destroys the economy of the country. So now they're going to start dumping these petrodollars because now Saudi's saying, we'll take the yuan, we'll take the Brazilian currency, we'll take rubles. So once the reserve currency is lost, the American dollar is worthless. It's going to be worthless. Amazing. Over a war that we should have never had anything to do with. Ukraine. Really? Ukraine? I mean, this is insanity. Risking a nuclear conflagration. For what? I mean, people have to deal with their own problems, right? I mean, it's part of this whole idea that you can police the world. We can't even police ourselves. Have you looked at the crime rates lately out there? You can't govern others if you can't govern yourselves. I mean, the Khalifa is given to those who self-govern. إِنِّي جَعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. Right? But what is the hallmark of that Khalifa? Knowledge. That's what Allah says. Look how many times in that verse knowledge in its different forms is mentioned. It's amazing. And knowledge is not just, theoretical knowledge, but it's also knowledge that's applied. Because he told him to bi asma'ihim, tell them, apply your knowledge, show them what you can do. So, these are the كَلَّا بَلْ تُحِبُّونَ الْعَاجِلَةَ. You just put off what's coming, kick it down the road. I mean, no ethical generation would ever acquire debt that they're just going to hand to the next generation. Like, you can't hand another generation your debt. It's unethical. You should pay your own debts. So you're borrowing money for your enjoyment or for your standard of living that is going to end up creating misery for your offspring. Either your children or your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren. Somebody's going to pay the price for what you're doing. And that's selfishness, which is a horrible thing, horrible quality. وَلِذَلِكَ يَكْرَهُ أَكْثَرُ النَّاسِ مَا يَأْمُرُ بِهِ الْعَقْلُ. And for that reason, most people disdain what their reason tells them to do. وَيُمِيلُ إِلَى مَا يَأْمُرُ بِهِ الْهَوَىٰ. And they incline towards what their passions tell them to do. حَتَّى قِيلَ الْعَقْلُ صِدِّيقٌ مَقْطُوعٌ وَالْهَوَىٰ عَدُوٌّ مَتْبُوعٌ. To the point where it's even been said that the reason is a friend that's been cut off, and passion is an enemy that's followed. ولذلك قيل إذا ما دعتك النفس يوما بشهوة وكان عليها للقبيح الطريق فدعها وخالف ما اشتهيت فإنها عدو ودود والخلاف صديق. ولذلك قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم حفت الجنة بالمكاره وحفت النار بالشهوات. So the poet said, if your nafs enjoins you to some appetite, but to get to it will lead to something untoward, something bad, leave it and go against what you desire, because it's an enemy, it's a loving enemy. وَالْخِلَافُ صَدِيقُ. And to go against it is your friend. And then the Prophet ﷺ for that reason said, حُفَّتَ الْجَنَّةُ بِالْمَكَارِهِ وَحُفَّتَ النَّارُ بِالشَّهَوَاتِ. It's a really important hadith, that the paradise is surrounded by distasteful things, like getting up at dawn and praying. It's not easy on the self. It's one of the times where sleep is deepest for most people. Doing wudu when the water's cold. Giving money, like in shahih. The Prophet said the best sadaqah is when you're sahihun shahihun yakhsha al-faqr. When you're in a good state, but you're covetous of your wealth and fearing poverty. That's the best, because you're going against your nafs. So all those things, when you go against yourself, those are the things that get you close to Allah, is going against the self. Following the self, the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-mu'minu kayyis, fatan. The mu'min is kayyis. Qiyas says intelligence. The mu'min has intelligence. Man dana nafsuhu, like he dana nafsuhu wa amala lima ba'da al-maut, and he works for what's after death. So he disciplines his soul and he works for what's after his death. Wal ahmaqu, the idiot is the one that atba' nafsuhu hawaha wa tamanna 'ala Allah al-amani. He just lets his intellect do whatever, his self do whatever it wants, follow its own passions, and then he has vain wishes. Umniya is a wish. Raja is a hope that's coupled with action. Umniya is a wish that has no action. There's no action to it.